My true story from Louisiana. They plotted to burn me alive in the Suv after secretly buying a $5 million zero life insurance policy in my name. They thought I'd die quietly. I lived loudly and legally. That SUV is just like her, looks polished but reeks of decay, just a shell, disgusting. I cannot even sit in same room with her. Why is she still here? She smells like mothballs and death. As long as she's breathing, I have to pretend to care. I am so tired of it. She needs to die already so we can collect insurance. I stood behind the bedroom door, holding the cup of tea. They had asked me to bring. My hands trembled, but not from the weight of the porcelain. It was the word, so sharp, so deliberately, pierced through me cleaner than any knife could. The tea rippled in the cup, and for a moment I thought it would spill, but I just stood there frozen, listening. That house, that very room, Wasman. Once I had picked out the wallpaper, chosen the curtains with lace edge spot, the dining table that still sat in the kitchen. My late husband and I had built our life in that house from scratch. Every inch bore the fingerprints of love, struggle, and frugal patience, and yet now, after he was gone, I had become a tolerated ghost in my own home. They didn't know I was standing there. They never looked back to check if the woman they talked about was within earshot to them. I was a fixture, an old sofa they could not yet throw away. I gripped the teacup tighter and stepped away, careful not to make a sound. When I reached my room, I locked the door for the first time in years after my husband passed away. I lasted 4 months alone. The house felt too quiet, too hollow. I had thought the silence would be peaceful, but it was heavy. Every room reminded me of him, office of the way we used to laugh at the news while folding laundry, or dance slowly in the kitchen after dinner, even into our 60s. My son Robert had offered, at least back then. It sounded like an offer for me to move in with him and his wife. Alicia, it'll be easier for you, Ma, he said. No more driving, no more cooking, no more bills. It had sounded reasonable, even kind. He asked me to transfer the deed to the house, just to avoid future complications. He was my son, my only child. I trusted him, so I signed it. They moved in a week later. At first things were polite, not warm, not exactly welcoming, but polite. Alicia called me Mom, like it tasted sour in her mouth, and Robert was always too busy to look me in the eyes. I chalked it up to adjustment. Grief makes people odd, and I was still waking up every morning expecting my husband's voice, but it did not take long before I saw the cracks. They started by rearranging the house, putting all my things in boxes and labeling them storage. My late husband's recliner disappeared without a word. The piano I played every Sunday morning ended up in the garage, too bulky, Alicia said. I was moved to the guest room at the back of the house, the one with no window view and a draft that crawled up my legs at night. I said nothing. I tried to stay out of their way, to be helpful, to not bother. Then came the subtle isolations. Alicia cooked meals, but I always found my plateau ready, covered in plastic wrap on the table, separate from theirs. They ate in the dining room. I ate in the kitchen. My coffee mug disappeared one day. When I asked about it, Alicia said it was old and chipped. I threw it out. You can receive disposable ones. The bathroom down the hall, once shared, was suddenly labeled Robert and Alicia, only in bolded letters. I was to use the half bath in the laundry room, the one with the creaky door and broken sink stopper. My towels were moved out, so were my toiletries. Even the dog, a golden retriever named Benny, who used to sleep at my feet, began to avoid me. Alicia did not like dog hair, so Benny was not allowed in my room anymore. Still, I treaty bought groceries, I ironed Robert's shirts, I watered the plants when Alicia had a cold. I brought her tea, she did not drink it, and now the words I overheard were not a slip of frustration, they were plans, not just impatience or weariness, but eagerness, a desire for me to die for money insurance. What insurance? My heart beat so hard in my chest. I could hear it. I sat on the edge of my bed, that lukewarm cup of tea still in my hand, and stared at the wall. It had faded just slightly from sunlight. Over the years, I remembered painting it with my husband, laughing when we accidentally used the wrong shade. Now that wall was the only thing still familiar in this house. Everything else had changed. I wasn't safe here. I was not wanted. I was not loved, but I was awake now, and I was not ready to die. 2 days after, I overheard them plotting. Robert came home with a surprise. "Got you something, Ma?" he said, flashing a grin that did not quite reach his eyes. "Come outside?" Alicia stood behind him with her arms folded, a forced smile pressed against her face like lipstick on a crack. I followed them out of the driveway. There, it was a dark gray SUV, shiny, clean, big for you, Robert said, dangling a key fob in front of me so you can get around more easily. Grocery store, a church, whatever you like, no more depending on us. I blinked. It was strangest last week, Alicia complained. I was too old to be trusted behind a wheel. Now suddenly, I was being handed keys to a brand new vehicle. I reached for the keys with cautious fingers, and Robert dropped them in my hand with a triumphant little nod. "It's all yours, Ma. We even added you to the insurance policy, made it official." That word echoed like a stone down a well. Alicia stepped forward and opened the driver's side door for me as if I were a guest at some dealership event. "We had it detailed, and everything smells like new, right?" It did. The leather smelled untouched. The dashboard still had that protective film. The back seat had a plush new blanket folded neatly in the corner. I should have asked questions. I should have wondered why, after months of cold shoulders and cruel comments, they were suddenly acting like the children I remembered, but I did not. Instead, I smiled. I told myself maybe they felt guilty, maybe Robert realized what he said, maybe Alicia had a change of heart, maybe, just maybe, the idea of losing me had shaken something loose in their souls. They started doing other things too. Robert offered to drive me to my doctor's appointment. Alicia came back from the pharmacy with new pills, saying the doctor had prescribed a mild sleep aid to help me rest better. I had never seen the prescription pad. I never met that doctor, but they said it was all taken care of. They were just trying to help me rest more. They invited me to go for walks at the park. No less. Alicia packed a blanket and snacks. Robert helped me into the SUV like a chauffeur. We sat by the water. I told them story. Essie, do not know why I started telling them things I had buried for decades. Maybe because I wanted it to be real, maybe because I missed being seen. I talked about the little classroom I used to teach in back when I was just Miss Geneva from the parish schoolhouse. I told them about the Christmas we gave each student mittens and how I had to stay late to sew patches into mine so the kids would not see the holes. Robert stared at the lake. I told them about the time he brought home his first ribbon from the state spelling bee, how I had taken a photo of him with a disposable camera and framed it for our hallway. That frame, I noticed, was no longer on the wall. Alicia nodded, politely chewing her snack. Robert said nothing. He did not even blink. It was like he was waiting for me to stop talking. Later that night, I opened the new bottle of sleeping pills. The label had my name on it, but pharmacy name looked odd. I had never heard of it. It was out of town in some small place I had never visited. Thepels were light blue. Unfamiliar, I stared at them in my palm and felt the chill creep up my spine again. This wasn't kindness, this was choreography, a perfect little dance to lull me into stillness. The SUV was not a gift, it was a stage, a set piece for a story they were writing without my consent. The story often old. Woman tired, confused, drifting off behind the wheel and dying tragically in a fiery accident. Except I was not confused and I was not tired, not anymore. The house was dark and the air felt thick. I had woken up with a dry throat, me tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. It was one of those humid Louisiana nights when even the walls seemed sweet. I slipped on my slippers, careful not to make noise, and made my way toward the kitchen. The hallway creaked under my steps, soft as whispers, but something else caught my ear. Voices. I stopped. It was Robert and Alicia. Their bedroom door was cracked open, just slightly, the sliver of light casting a thin, sharp line across the floor. "Are you stupid?" Robert hissed. "If the car explodes, it has to look like an accident. No evidence, no questions. You want to go to jail over this? Then check the damn device again." Alicia snapped back. "I do not want to end up in prison for $5 million. That thing better go off right when she's on the bridge. No delays, no malfunctions." My breath caught. My hand instinctively went to my chest, pressing against the trembling that had suddenly taken hold. "She's barely functioning anyway." Alicia continued, her voice growing louder. "That SUV is just like her looks, polished, boot reeks of decay, just a shell, disgusting. I cannot even sit in the same room with her. Let's get this over with." "Robert, I want to be in Hawaii before winter." Silence, then a sigh. Robert, calmer now, muttered, "Well, time. The bridge is 2 miles from the gas station. We make sure the ignition timer activates halfway across. That's it." Boom, burnt frame case closed. I stood there, frozen. The cup I had meant to fill still in my hand. My legs felt like wax, barely holding me. Uppy backed away, slowly, praying the floorboards would not betray me. When I got back to my room, I locked the door and collapsed against it. They were planning to kill me, not metaphorically, not passively, not by neglect or cruel. Tibby had planned it. They had talked about the logistics, the timing, the method. Alicia had called me a shell, disgusting, something to be discarded. I stared into the darkness of my room, my hands shaking. My heart beat so loudly it seemed to echo through the mattress, through the floor, like a warning drum. For a long time, I sat there in silence, just breathing, just trying to stay conscious. All the pieces clicked: the SUV, the sudden kindness, the sleep aids, the restful drives to the edge of town freeway. Alicia watched me buckle my seatbelt like she was memorizing every detail for the police report, the whole show, the production, the performance they had staged with me as the unknowing star. Except now I knew, and it broke something inside me, not in the way people talk about heartbreak or betrayal. It was quieter, colder. I did not feel grief. I did not feel rage. I felt removed, as if my soul had stepped slightly outside my body, just enough to see things clearly. What I saw was not a son. What I saw wasn't a family. What I saw were masks, hollow-eyed creatures wrapped in borrowed affection, smiling while measuring the distance to the cliff's edge. They had called me a shell, but they were the ones who were empty. I looked around my room. The floral lamp I had bought at a yard sale 30 years ago, the quilt I had sewn myself thread by thread during nights when I could not sleep, After my husband died, the photo of Robert as a child still tucked in the edge of my mirror. His smile wide and innocent and forever unreachable now was. I'm mourning no mourning belongs to love, and there was no love left here, only strategy. I lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. My ears still echoed with Alicia's voice, just Ashel. They had no idea I had heard them, and that was the one thing that kept me live that night. Not fear, not despair, but the knowledge that I had time, not much, but enough. They left every Sunday morning around 9:30 to go to the farmer's market. Alicia liked to make a show of it. Floppy sun hat, oversized sunglasses, wicker basket hanging from her elbow, like she was in some southern magazine. Spread. Robert followed behind with an empty cooler, always checking his phone like he had somewhere more important to be. It gave me exactly 45 minutes off quiet in the house, 45 minutes of stillness without their eyes watching me like surveillance cameras hidden behind politeness. That Sunday, I did not sit on the porch or water the plants like I usually did. I waited exactly 3 minutes after I heard the garage door close and the SUV pull out of the driveway. Then I moved. I went straight to their bedroom. My heart pounded in my ears, but my hands were steady. I opened drawers, methodically, not rummaging, just looking, listening, knowing I was not even sure what I was searching for until I found it. A brown accordion folder. It was wedged between stacks of old magazines in the bottom drawer of Alicia's vanity, hidden behind a tangle of scarves no one wore. The folder was heavy, thick with papers. I brought it to my room and locked the door behind me. I sat on the bed, folder in my lap as if it might explode. Then I opened it. What I saw made my vision tunnel. At the top of the first page was my name, Geneva Marie Collier, my birth date, my social security number, my current address, a policy number, a policy amount $5 million, the words life insurance. Primary insured stared back at me like a dare. I turned to the second page. Robert's name was listed as the sole beneficiary. Alicia's was listed as the emergency contact and care proxy. My hand gripped the paper so tightly it crinkled, but what stopped my breath, what truly stole the air from my lungs, was the signature line at the bottom, Geneva M. Collier. In cursive, curved, elegant, but not mine. It looked close enough to pass a glance, but I knew every loop and every flourish of my handwriting. I had spent years grading papers, signing report cards, filling out checks and forms and permission slips. That was not my signature. It was a forgery, not a poor one. Either someone had practiced, trace studied, maybe even used old documents of mine to get it right. I stared at it for a long time. They had planned everything. They had chosen the company, some out-of-state firm I had never heard offerably for less scrutiny. They had fabricated paperwork. They had forged my consent. They had declared me insured for $5 million, and they had timed my death. I flipped through the rest of the folder with surgical precision. Inside were emails between Alicia and an insurance agent. She referred to me as our gang dependent. She asked questions about accidental death clauses and whether a fire caused by vehicle malfunction would be eligible for payout. She even requested expedited processing because I was in declining health. I saw one note from Robert to the agent. Please keep a correspondence confidential. She is elderly and doesn't handle stress well. I nearly laughed. That is how he described me, a liability in a bathrobe. I found a receipt for a device purchased online. A custom ignition relay timer wired to trigger combustion through an app. The delivery Address was our home. The name on the invoice was Alicia's. In the back of the folder was a final document, a typed letter of intent, drafted but not signed, written in first person, supposedly from me. It stated that I had requested Alicia to handle my estate and that I had gratefully accepted the gift of a new vehicle to encourage my independence. The gall, the precision. They had built a coffin out of paper and signed my name across the lid. I sat there for what felt like hours staring at the stack of evidence in my hands. I thought about the Sunday pot roasts I used to make, the Christmas stockings Ihan made for Robert, the time I gave Alicia my late mother's brooch because she said she had nothing nice to wear to church. All lies, all eyes, all that kindness returned with legal murder. I was not crying. Tears belonged to heartbreak. This was something colder, something steelier. This was war. I slipped the folder back into its place, careful to leave every scarf as I had found it. I closed the drawer, slowly listening to the soft click as it shut. Then I walked back to my room and sat on the bed again. I looked at the mirror. I saw my own eyes, tired, yes, but no longer foggy. I had seen their plan, now they would see mine. I took out my old address book. The pages were brittle, the ink fading, but one number stood out, like it had been waiting for this day. Evelyn. Thomas, attorney at law, retired, but not idle. She had been my best friend in high school, had lost touch as people do, but we exchanged Christmas cards every year, and he had kept her number tucked between pages like a pressed flower. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. Evelyn speaking. I breathed. Evie, it's Geneva. A pause. Jenny, my God, it's been you. Okay. I looked down at the folder, still warm in my hands. No, I said, but I think I'm ready to be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the faint outline of something rise inside me. Not hope, not yet, but resolve. And that would do. Evelyn Thomas arrived 3 days later. She drove herself in a dusty blue sedan, wore oversized sunglasses, and stepped out of the car like she was walking into a courtroom. Her silver gray hair was tied back tight, and her blazer was crisp despite the Louisiana heat. She looked every bit the woman I remembered, sharp-poised with that same nonsense energy that used to make the boys at school go silent. I opened the door, and for a second, we just stared at each other. It's been a while, I said softly. Too long, she replied, stepping in and hugging me so hard I thought my ribs might shift. She smelled like peppermint and old books. We didn't waste time on tea or cookies. Evelyn set her bag on my kitchen table, pulled out a slim black folder, a small digital recorder, and a yellow legal pad. All right, she said, clicking her pen. Tell me everything's no detail is too small, and don't hold back, Ginny. I need the whole truth. Is that down? Hands clasped tightly in my lap, I told her everything. From the moment Robert invited me to move in, to the subtle cruelties, to the SUV gift, to the hard conversation about the ignition timer. I described the forged signature, the $5 million zero life insurance policy, Alicia's emails about vehicle malfunction, and the letter of intent I never wrote. Evelyn listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally, or scribbling furiously. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and said, "These two idiots think they're smarter than the law. That's their first mistake." He almost smiled. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "We're going to do this right, Geneva. No confrontations, no accusations. Not yet. We build, we gather. What time it?" She handed me a tiny recording device. "You'll keep This on you. Whenever you're in the house, they'll slip up again. They always do. Get them on tape. Clear, unambiguous words. I'll handle the rest. We spent the afternoon scanning documents. She photographed every page of the insurance folder. She used a magnifying glass to compare my real signature on old checks and letters to the forged one. Not even close, she muttered. Their arrogance will be our evidence. That evening, we went to look at the SUV. Evelyn was careful, gloved, precise. She opened the hood, checked under the dash, peeked into the trunk. She took pictures of the wiring near the ignition. This isn't standard, she said, pointing to a device with unfamiliar wiring. This is a retrofit, probably off-market. Controlled remotely, cheap but deadly. I felt my stomach twist. She saw it in my face. We won't let them get away with it, Jenny. Not on my watch. Back inside. She pulled out a checklist. Here's what we need: audio recordings of intent, more digital traces, emails, text message, SAP purchases, anything, and one controlled witness, someone unrelated, who can testify to their treatment of you. Think neighbors, caretakers, mailman, anyone who's seen or heard something. I nodded. Slowly, my mind already scanning through faces and names. Evelyn packed Upus. The sun dipped below the cypress trees before she left. She turned and looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen in years, not just as a lawyer, but as the friend who once stayed up all night with me after my father died, braiding my hair and telling me I'd survive anything. You're not alone in this, she said, and you're not crazy. What they're doing, it's premeditated, attempted murder. And we're going to bury them with their own paperwork. I stood at the door after she left, holding the recorder in my palm. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like proof. I started pretending 2 days before I left. I shuffled slower than usual, let conversations trail off mid-sentence. I left the kettle boiling until it screamed like a siren when Alicia came storming in. I stared at the steam like I did not understand what it was. She looked me over with that glint of cruel satisfaction. She's finally slipping, she muttered under her breath. Could I dropped a fork at dinner and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. I repeated the same story about my old classroom twice in one day. I laughed at the wrong moment when Robert made a Jacoby, started whispering again. This time, they were not angry whispers. They were confident, triumphant. They believed the end was near. They thought I was dissolving week by week into the harmless old woman they needed me to be. That was my gift to them. My final performance at 4:07 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I slipped out the front door. I wore the same shoes I had worn to my husband's funeral. I packed no bags. I took no keepsakes, just my ID, a manila envelope of documents, and the small digital recorder Evelyn had given me. I left one thing behind: a single envelope in the kitchen counter, addressed in my handwriting. Inside was a note: your mother didn't die in an accident. She walked away. I walked 3 blocks before calling the car service. Evelyn had arranged. The driver did not speak much, was kind, did not ask why. An old woman was climbing into the back seat with eyes that looked like winter. He dropped him off at a safe house Evelyn had secured near Baton Rouge. Quiet, nondescript, 1-bedroom with thick curtains and a pantry full of canned food. She had already arrived, pacing the living room, her blazer off, but her eyes still sharp as ever. You made it, she said. I always do, I replied. Within an hour, she had filed the formal complaint. She called the Bureau of Alcohol tobacco, firearms, and explosives ATF. Not just the police, the ATF had jurisdiction over vehicle explosives and tampering devices. She submitted everything, the photographs of forged signature analysis, the insurance documents, the email prints, and most damning of all, the audio recordings were clear. Crystal Alicia's voice laughing, that SUV is just like her, shiny on the outside, rotten underneath. Robert whispering back, timer set, once she hits the bridge, it's done. The case was flagged as priority. Within 48 hours, a federal investigative unit was assigned. 2 agents showed up at the house under the guise of a vehicle recall investigation. Alicia let them into the garage with a smile, still wearing her designer robe. Robert hovered behind her, half interested, half distracted. They had no idea they were being watched, recorded, documented. Agents examined the SUV. One took photos, the other opened the dashboard panel and removed a strange device connected to the ignition wires. They said it was part of a routine diagnostic and left within hour that night. The lab confirmed the worst. The device was a combustion relay. It was wired to activate through a custom app, one available only on Android platforms with sideload access. They tracked the source. The app had been downloaded to a Samsung phone registered under Alicia's maiden name. The activation logs matched the planned date of our family road trip. It had been